So in this lesson, we're going to be discussing the order of operations and learning how to approach problems that need to be simplified. So the learning target is I can apply my understanding of terms of a numerical expression so that I can simplify that numerical expression following the proper order of operations. I'll know I've got it when I scored 100% on the assignment my teacher gives me after this lesson. So before we get into order of operations and simplifying numerical expressions, we need to get some notation understood. So do you know other symbols used to show multiplication and division in math? Most of the time we don't use the X in algebra to show multiplication or the division symbol here with the two dots to show division. In algebra, we start to change the notation for multiplication and division. And here are some things you may see right here when you're in that algebra world. When I say algebra world, it's when we have variables, which are letters that represent unknown numbers in our math problems. So we start to see the alphabet show up as possible numbers for our problems. So they'll replace the times sign with a dot or an asterisk. This is called an asterisk. It's like a little star. They will put two numbers in parentheses with no symbol in between the two numbers. That means multiplication. Or they'll just place it on the first number or the second number, those parentheses, in the multiplication problem, again, with no symbol in between those two numbers. So all of these are multiplication problems. This reads 8 times 6. The dot is read as times. 7, the asterisk is also read as times, 7 times 12. And when there's no symbol, we will insert the word times. 9 times 4, 3 times 4, and 2 times 6. You'll see this notation more often as you travel up through higher levels in your math, and you're going to get a lot of that new notation this year. Division is also another symbol, like I said, that we lose this symbol with the two dots and they start to replace it with the fraction bar. In these two instances, this would read 10 divided by, you would read it as if that symbol was in between them, 10 divided by 2 and 20 divided by 6 in this fraction vertical form. And then the backslash, that backslash is also replaces, and this is 9 divided by 3. So you have to get used to that notation and recognize it as we go through the lesson. We have some vocabulary we need to cover after that notation that you need to understand as we go through the examples today before we jump into actually performing the order of operations on numerical expressions. First, let's just talk about what a numerical expression is. It's basically a math problem that does not contain an equal sign. So when you're working your problems out on your assignments following this lesson, we will avoid using that equal sign. We are going to just strictly write numerical expressions to represent our amounts. So you're going to have a math problem. Math problems are made up of what we call terms, and this word is the key to order of operations. And we are going to practice with this word in the next few examples. So math problems are made up of terms, and they also can have operations in them. They don't necessarily need operations, but they're terms for sure, at least one term, and then it can be multiple terms with multiple operations involved. So they can be very simple, like the number 19. That is a term. It's just a number, and we call it a term. So this expression, circle that. That expression has one term, and it's the number 19. This next one, I highlighted the pluses and the minuses. Our terms fall in between these plus and minus signs. So when you're looking for terms in a numerical expression in a math problem, this is a math problem, you are looking for the numbers or terms that fall between the pluses and the minuses. It happens to be 4 numbers here. So 2 is a term, 8 is a term, 9 is a term, and 6 is a term. This is 4 terms. Then example 3, we highlight the plus sign and my terms fall to the left and to the right of that plus sign. So it's 3 squared is one term. It consists of 2 numbers, a base and an exponent, that together form one term. There's no plus or minus in between these 2 numbers. So it's lumped together as one term, and that is so important you understand to recognize this as a term, even though there's 2 numbers to it. and 4 is also a term. So this expression consists of two terms that we're adding together. This next one, example 4, I highlighted the minus sign so we can easily see the terms that go in between those. We have this, 16 divided by 2. That is one term. That's not a plus or minus sign, so they stuck together as one term. 4 is just a simple term, and 3 times 2. It's not a simple term because there's a multiplication symbol in there, but it's lumped together as one term. It's not separated by a plus or minus. Remember, terms are separated by the pluses and the minuses, so we lump it together. And this is 1, 2, 3 terms. So one of the keys to our lesson today that you have to understand before we can get to order of operations is how to identify the terms in your expressions. So now that we defined terms and we went over terms, get rid of that, boop, it's in the way. We defined terms and we went over how to find those terms easily. I want you to practice identifying the terms, because if you cannot identify the terms, the order of operations are going to be a challenge for you to get correct. So the recipe for identifying terms that we're going to follow here in the beginning of the lesson is to first, step 1, go in and highlight the addition and subtraction symbols. Let's just do this example right here. I want you to pause the video. I want you to highlight just the addition and subtraction symbols in this expression and then turn the video back on to make sure you've highlighted correctly. Okay, that's step 1. So if you highlighted that correctly, you're in good shape. The next step is I want you to circle each term in that expression. Pause the video, circle each term, and then count how many and put your answer in this box. Turn the video back on to see if you got it correct. So you should have circled 19 as a term, 8 as its own term, and 21. And if you count your circles, there were 3 terms in that expression. So now I want you to do the next example. This time you're going to highlight the pluses and minuses in your expression, step 1. Then you're going to circle your terms, step 2. Then you're going to count the terms and write your number on the line here. And then when you're done, turn the video back on to see if you got the whole thing correct. See if you can identify the terms accurately. Okay, so in this next example that you finished, you should have also gotten 3 terms. Now, when you look at this example compared to this example, this looks like it would have less terms than this one. However, it doesn't. It's just that 2 of our terms, the 4 times 3 and the 6 divided by 2, are not down to a number yet. We're going to have to do some work to just whittle those down to look like a simplified term like 12. So they are terms, so you got to circle them, and then we are going to have a little more work if we're going to do this math problem compared to this math problem over here. But it is still 3 terms, even though it's just more complex than this one, right? And this one right here, let's look at this one together. So a little guy pondering this one over here, he's saying, I'm not sure about this one. This looks a little weird. And he might think that because there are no pluses and minuses. Step 1 cannot be done. We have no pluses and minuses in this expression. It's still an expression because it's a math problem. It just doesn't contain addition and subtraction. It contains multiplication and division. So it is one big term with 2 operations in it. There's 2 things in that one. So it's a complex term. They call those nested terms. That's the fancy math name for it. So how many terms are in this expression? Just 1. There's also 1 in our expression back up there. We did number that with the 19. Oh, it's in another problem. Anyway, the number 19 was one of our examples of 1 term. This is also 1 term. Again, it's nested. It's just more complicated because it has some operations in it, but it's still considered 1 term. So hopefully you know how to identify terms by highlighting the plus and minus signs, circling each term you've identified between those pluses and minuses, and counting them up. If you're struggling with that, go back and try those examples again, because you need to have that figured out before we can keep going. All right, this next one says we're going to simplify or evaluate numerical expressions. This is, again, a vocabulary term you'll see in the directions when you're doing your homework tonight. But we need to know what that means in those directions. If you see the word simplify the expression or evaluate the numerical expression, it means do the math. Just do the math. By performing all the operations in the expression in the correct order. And we'll see what that looks like in just a second. If those words are not clear to you, we'll put the words to a problem. The next thing you need to know is a math term that it's not a math term, it's a teacher term. I'm going to put in a lot of your problems to start. When I ask you to evaluate or simplify, I want to see funneling steps. There's a lot of times where you know the answers mentally and you can compute in your head. But when you are showing your steps, you're basically explaining to me what you're doing to come up with your answer. And if you do 2 or 3 steps in all at once, and don't show me those steps, I don't know how you got to your answer. I don't know if you followed the right order of operations or not. So when I'm asking you to funnel in your work, and it's required, it means to write your steps in organized, neat rows. Work each term. You're going to work through each term left to right. And you will not use equal signs in your work when you're asked to evaluate numerical expressions or funnel. So I don't want to see those equal signs in your work following this lesson. I'll show you how you show equality in a different way called funneling. Some of you already do funnel your steps. You're already in the habit of it. Some of you do not funnel yet, and that's what we're going to work on. Okay, we're going to take a look at some examples here. So we are going to be practicing identifying terms and performing their 6th grade type problems, 6th grade standards for order of operations. So we're going to do some work with some basic problems. And the steps you are to require through these notes, the way I'm modeling it, is we're going to again highlight the addition and subtraction problems like we were just practicing. That is to help us to identify the terms in our expression. Once we've identified the terms, we're going to make sure we circle each one. And then we're going to, from there, simplify each term working left to right. And we're just going to perform one operation at a time in neat rows. So looking at this first example, I have 9 minus 4 plus 7 plus 2. And so I highlighted the pluses and minuses and circled each term. Each term is just basically a number. And when I have just numbers and addition and subtraction is the only operations in it, I simply work left to right, doing one addition subtraction problem at a time. So for example, I would do this first. I would not come over here and try to do this yet. 2 at the same time, 1 at a time. So we do this one subtraction problem, and then we bring the plus 7 and the plus 2 down because we're not going to do those yet. Once we've cleared that, we do the next addition, working left to right, and we get 12. And then we bring the 2 plus 2 down because we're only doing one addition or subtraction problem at a time, working left to right. 12 plus 2 is 14. And you've got it done. Again, left to right, one operation at a time. Okay, so those terms that we were given here were all just numbers. It's a pretty basic problem and only had addition and subtraction in it. Now we're going to look at this next one. So I want you to pause the video. I want you to highlight the plus and minus and circle the terms, and then turn the video back on to make sure you've identified your 3 terms. Okay, you should have a minus and a plus highlighted, and you should have circled 36 divided by 3. That's one term. 3 squared, that's your second term. And 6, that's your third term. When you look at these terms, this one right here is simplified and ready to go, but these are not. These are a little more complex because they have math going on. They have an operation inside the term. This operation is division, and this operation is squaring. So what we need to do next is we need to simplify each one of these before we can start our addition and subtraction like we did over here. So I want you to pause the video. I want you to simplify this term, and 6 is done. So we're just going to bring it down because it's already simplified. So pause, do these 2 math problems, and write them on the line. Yeah, write them on the lines and then turn it back on to see if you got it correct. So 36 divided by 3 is 12. Now I've got a number there. 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9. If you had a 6 here, you got confused about your exponents. It does not mean 3 times 2 or 3 plus 3. It means 3 times 3, which is 9. So if you had a 6 here or something else, you got to fix that. And then the plus 6 was simplified. There was nothing to do. We just brought it down. So we replaced this expression with an equivalent expression that's less complicated because we got rid of these two operations and just replaced them with their equivalent values. Now we're ready because we got 3 terms that are just numbers. We're going to go left to right. We're going to make sure we subtract this first. 12 minus 9 is 3. The plus 6 we're not going to do yet, even though I know you could probably do all this row in your head. We're going to do one at a time. Subtraction first, left to right, and then add last and for your answer of 9. Now this next example, they're getting more complicated. So what I want you to do, they're just more complex, not really that difficult, just more complex looking. But we're going to make it simpler by highlighting the addition and subtraction problems so we can easily identify those terms that need some cleaning up. And so I want you to pause the video, highlight the plus and minuses, circle each term, and then check to see that you got the terms identified correctly. So again, this is just like our last problem. We have 3 terms here. The only difference is this term here didn't need to be cleaned up, but all 3 terms need to clean up. So you need to perform the operations on each of these. Before you can subtract and add anything, you need to clean up those 3 terms. And then pause the video, get those cleaned up, and then turn the video back on to see if you've got the right values on those lines. Okay, so we cleaned up 16 divided by 5 is 12, 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 6 times 5 is 30. So hopefully you had those correct. If not, you need to fix it up, study up where those numbers just came out of. And then what I want you to do is finish up this problem to make sure you know how to handle this subtraction and addition piece, and then turn the video back on when you have this row and this row complete. So if you did this correctly, you would have done the subtraction first. We work left to right once we get our terms all simplified up, and the only thing that's left is subtraction and or addition. You just work the math left to right. 12 minus 2 is 10. Bring down your plus 30. Only do one at a time, even if you can do the rest all in your head. Now do the 10 plus 30 and you get 40. This funneling process, all these rows are required work for your assignment. Don't skip rows and go from here to your answer 40. Show me this step right here and then finalize it up. One operation at a time. That's that funneling I want to see. All right, we're going to have more practice here, but we're going to ditch a step. I am having you get rid of the highlight, the subtraction and plus signs to see how you do with that, because we don't want to always have to have our highlighter out to simplify these math problems. It's time consuming and your problems get more complicated with more and more symbols in them. So the goal here is to be able to identify those terms, just circle them without the highlighting. See if you can find the proper terms without highlighting those pluses and minuses. If you struggle and you can't identify those terms yet without the highlighting, you can go back to it, but recognize that the end goal is not to need to highlight to find your terms. It's to get used to seeing what to look for, and the highlighting does help with that initially, but you should be able to lose that step as you practice more and more. So try to circle the terms in this first expression right here. Turn the video back on to see if you circled the right things, each term individually. So you should have circled the number 15, the math problem 2 cubed, the math problem 56 divided by 8, and 4. So those are 4 terms. So now we're up to 4 terms and they're not all cleaned up. This one is all cleaned up. So you don't have anything in row 1 to do to that, and this is all cleaned up. So you are going to now funnel this. So I want you to just do the first row. What should the first row look like if your job is to clean up the problem, this and this, and end up with just a row of numbers that are being added and subtracted to one another? So do row 1 and turn the video back on to make sure you have row 1 done correctly. So you should have had 15 minus 8 minus 7 plus 4. If you did not have an 8 here and you had a 6, you're struggling with that exponent rule. The exponent rule says this is 2 multiplied to itself 3 times. 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8. If you didn't get 8 and you got 6, you multiplied 2 times 3 to get your 6. You did 2 plus 2 plus 2 instead of 2 times 2 times 2. So fix that up and watch out for those exponents. You got to make sure you're not making that same mistake over and over again. So be careful on the exponents. Now that we have 4 terms that are all just numbers, we clean this up, you are now ready to go left to right and do the one row at a time. So I want you to pause the video. I want you to try to funnel this down, going left to right, only doing one operation at a time. So this is going to require a few more rows of work. Do not do it all at once in your head, left to right, and give me an answer here. There should be a row of work here, here, and then a final answer. So you have 3 more rows of work to show for this problem to funnel properly. So we're down to subtraction and addition, and you needed to do 15, take away 8 first. And then that's it. That's the only computation I want to see you do, and you get 7 here. Bring down the minus 7 plus 4, because we're going to do those coming up. The next one is the 7 minus 7, and you should have gotten 0 here. And then bring down your plus 4, and finally 0 plus 4 is 4. So I need to see each of these rows. If your rows don't look exactly like my rows, you're not funneling, and you need to be doing that funneling process, working left to right. So fix it up so you know what's expected in your work, and I want you to try this next problem. So circle each term like the directions say. Try not to highlight the pluses and minuses. If you can't do it without highlighting, then by all means go back and highlight. If you're okay trying it this way without the highlighting, give it a whirl, because it'd be nice to not have that step to be able to recognize terms without it. Once you get the terms, the pluses and minuses highlighted and the terms circled, check it with the video before you move on to the next step. Okay, so you should have circled the 11. That's one term, 27 divided by 3, 10 times 2, and 6. So if you have those identified correctly, you're ready to go to the next step, which is row 1. I would like you to just clean up some of these terms. And so you'll still end up with 4 terms here. There'll just be a couple of them that change their look because you can do some math. So clean up, give me row 1, turn the video back on to make sure you have row 1 correct. So the 11 was in a simplest form. It wasn't complex at all. The 27 divided by 3, I just replaced with 9, the answer to that division problem. 10 times 2, I replaced that with 20, and I replaced the 6 with itself because there was nothing to simplify there. Make sure you brought your plus sign down between these 2 terms and the minus sign down between these 2 terms. Now you have a string of numbers that are being added and subtracted. So how you handle that is you do one operation at a time. So you're going to need a couple more rows here, here, and a final answer. So you have 3 more rows of work performing one addition or subtraction problem at a time, but you are always working left to right. That's how you know which one to do first, second, third, left to right. Pause the video, work it down, and see if you can get to the right result. So you should have done 11 plus 9 first, because that's the first operation we come across working left to right, and that becomes 20. We bring down the minus 20 plus 6 from above. Then we do 20 minus 20, left to right, and we get 0. And we bring down the plus 6 from above. And then we do 0 plus 6 is 6. And you're done. So that wraps up this lesson here, part 1. And just order of operations is just making sure you identify the terms, clean up any that need cleaning up before you can add and subtract. Once you get all your terms cleaned up, add and subtract left to right.